I mentioned earlier in the program that last year Amari Cooper told me he wanted to have 2,000 for himself. Sounds like he's not going to hog 2,000 this year. Not that he got there last year. He wants 1,000 for all three: Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. We were trying to figure out yesterday when we drafted the best number 2 receivers in the NFL. I mean, one of the challenges, who are the number 2 receivers? Who is the number 2 receiver behind Amari Cooper? Is it Gallup or is it CeeDee Lamb, Charean?
Are we sure it's not Amari Cooper? I'm just saying, Mike, they paid him $100 million. And you do wonder when they paid him that $100 million, if they knew what they know now, that CeeDee Lamb would be sitting there when they drafted and they could draft him, would they have paid Amari Cooper what they paid him? I'm thinking no. Now, I know the price they gave up to get him. But look, Amari Cooper was terrible last year on the road. And we saw him get benched. We saw him standing on the sideline there late in the season on the road because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing and running routes and everything else. I think Michael Gallup, I'm not saying he's their number 1 receiver. I'll agree with you that Amari Cooper's their number 1 receiver. I'm saying Amari Cooper needs to do more to live up to that $100 million contract. But I think it's Michael Gallup, and I like this guy, and I think he's really good, and I think he does all the right things, and he had 1,100 yards, just over 1,100 yards last season. And I think he could be their go-to receiver. He could be their number 1 receiver. Now, the problem comes 2 years from now, another season after this, and you're looking at how are you going to pay him, and you're not going to pay him, so he's going to walk away and get a huge contract somewhere else because you've got CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. But I think Michael Gallup is really good. I think he can be a number 1 receiver, and I think there's a chance he could be a number 1 receiver on this team in the next 2 years.
You mentioned the Amari Cooper contract, and they had to pay Cooper after what they gave up to get him during the 2018 season. They knew what they were getting themselves into by way of the option year contract and then the possibility of the franchise tag. But here's the thing to remember, because, yeah, it's $100 million technically. It's a 2-year commitment at about $40 million. After these next 2 seasons, Charean, they could just decide, we have our guy in CeeDee Lamb. We don't need Amari Cooper anymore. Whether they trade him, whether they cut him, whether they squeeze him to take less money. So maybe it's CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup over the long haul. Maybe the things that we noticed last year, the performance on the road, the benching. Maybe this ultimately leads to the Cowboys just keeping him long enough to justify the first-round pick they gave up to get him, and then focusing on Lamb and Gallup and whoever else they may be able to find.
You know, Amari does great things, and I love his personality. He's quiet in the locker room, and you know, he's a good leader. He's a good teammate. He does all the right things. But I think he needs to do more on the field and contribute more than what he has. And to me, he hasn't shown he's a number 1 receiver. He hasn't made the great catches. He hasn't put up the really huge yards. He hasn't been the go-to guy for Dak Prescott all the time. And sometimes when he has tried to go to him, either Amari hasn't made the play or it's turned into a turnover. So he needs to step up and do more this season, or they could be looking at that possibility after 2 seasons of moving on from him.
Hey, Charean, here's the key, too. Remember in the final year or 2 of Dez Bryant, when Dak Prescott was just getting his feet wet, there was that question as to whether or not Dak Prescott trusted Dez Bryant, would throw him the ball. You know, Dez Bryant's like, hey, I'll go get that ball. I don't care if it doesn't look like I'm open. And that created friction. Is there a level of trust that there needs to be between Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper?
Yeah, well, and I think that is a big question, and I don't think it's there yet. And I think that's still yet to be shown that is going to trust him in crunch time. You know, when they need a first down, when they need a touchdown, when they need something to happen in the red zone, whatever it may be. I think that's yet to be proven. And when you see Amari Cooper over there standing on the sidelines, and the Cowboys are trying to come back in a game, and Amari's standing on the sidelines, I think it's not there quite yet. I think he needs to do more to show that, and Dak needs to have more trust in him to make those plays when it matters. Whatever it is, it needs to change for the Cowboys if he's going to be their number 1 receiver, and really take the pressure. Let Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb do some things for you and take some of those double teams. I'm not sure how much they double team Amari Cooper all the time either, because they're not concerned about him all the time. So he needs to do a little bit more on the field, I think, for the Cowboys this season.
And his deal is a fairly simple proposition. He gets $20 million this year, $20 million next year, $20 million the next year. It's 5 years, $20 million each year. After that second season, it becomes very easy to move on. The guarantees go away. The cap hit would not be that bad. And Michael Gallup's under contract 2 more years at very, very low amounts. That's when you can have that transition from Amari Cooper over to Michael Gallup, along with C.D. Lamb, who would still be under his rookie contract for several more years. And this is a relevant conversation because Dak Prescott's going to continue to be not cheap. 31.4 this year, 37.68 next year. At some point, do they sign him to a long-term deal? If they do, he's going to eat up a lot of cap space. You can't have a ton of cap space tied up in your receivers, especially if Lamb ends up being really good and commands a big contract. I feel like even though Amari Cooper got one of the great receiver contracts in free agency without actually becoming a free agent who left for another team, it may not be a long stay for him, especially as these other guys step up. So if it's 3 guys for 1,000 yards, Charean, it may not last for very long because the other 2 may be the ones who are there. It's just, that's the way the business goes. All right,
Mike,
let's take a break.
Mike, I have to tell you, though, my favorite Cowboys number 2 receiver of all time, right? Tony Hill is my favorite Cowboys receiver. And you know who he was not number 1 to, and that would be Drew Pearson.
Wait a minute.
So it just gave me a chance to show this highlight.
That's a long way to just stick it in my back and twist.
Thanks, Matt.
Is Tony Hill... Is Tony? That's what you guys were. I knew you were talking about me during break. You know when you get that feeling that they're talking about me. I know they're planning something. They're plotting against me. Was Tony Hill the guy who caught the pass in the Super Bowl and immediately put it on the ground? Was that him? Or you know what I'm talking about? Was it Golden Richards?
Yes, that was Tony Hill.
Who was it?
No, it was.
Okay.
No, I think that was Tony Hill.
That was not a catch. All due respect to the Cowboys who beat.
Agreed.
They still would have beaten the Broncos that day because the Broncos' offense was worse than abysmal. But that highlight, and maybe we can find it during the break, he catches the ball and hits the ground and kind of does it. And the ball's there. He leaves the ball behind. It's like he never really has the ball or any feet on the ground or anything. It's just like he has it, he tumbles, and leaves the ball behind. It may have been Tony Hill. It may have been Golden Richards. We'll confirm that during the break.
I say
that all the time, and then we forget. But this time we'll remember. When we return, though, we will have a draft of the things that we miss about not having training camp in the preseason the way it usually is. We'll be back with more PFT Live right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.